This video was brought to you by NordVPN. On May the 14th, Turkey is due to go to the polls to elect a new parliament and president. At time of writing, incumbent President Erdogan is well behind in the polls, and his government's cack-handed response to the recent earthquake has put him under even more pressure. Nonetheless, however unlikely Erdogan's re-election might seem, it would be foolish to write off a politician who has won basically every election in Turkey for the past 20 years or so. So in this video, we're going to take a look at 3 reasons why Erdogan might actually win the next election. The fact that the main opposition candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, just isn't a good candidate, the so-called Kurdish question, and Erdogan and the AKP's control over Turkish political institutions. Now, before we get into it, a couple of caveats. First, these 3 reasons aren't intended as an exhaustive list, but please let us know in the comments if there's anything else you think we've missed. And second, this video is actually a successor to a previous video we did on why Erdogan won't win the next election. So go watch that for some balance after this one. Anyway, with that said, let's get into the first reason Erdogan might actually win the election: Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Basically, the main opposition parties in Turkey have realised that if they want to beat Erdogan, they need to work as a coalition, and last week they finally agreed on a presidential candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. In some sense, Kılıçdaroğlu was the obvious choice. He's the leader of the largest opposition party, the Republican People's Party, which was created by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the first president and founder of the modern Turkish Republic. He's also been in politics longer than the other candidates, and he's a good diplomat who's widely credited for building and holding together an ideologically diverse coalition of opposition parties, hence his nickname as Turkish Gandhi. However, whatever his merits, he's relatively unpopular, and his record at the ballot box against Erdogan is, well, not great. Since taking over in 2010, Kılıçdaroğlu has been on the losing side to Erdogan at 4 parliamentary elections, 2 presidential elections and 2 referendums. In the past, Erdogan has mocked him as a serial loser, and there were calls for his resignation after the 2018 election. While polling from around the time of the earthquake gives him a 14-point lead, polling in Turkey is notoriously unreliable, and Erdogan has held a slight lead over him before the earthquake. Perhaps more importantly though, Kılıçdaroğlu is significantly less popular than the other opposition candidates. Metropole polling from late last year, for example, put him neck and neck with Erdogan, but gave Mansur Yavaş and Ekrem İmamoğlu, Kılıçdaroğlu's proposed vice presidents, a 17 and 9-point lead respectively. Yavaş and İmamoğlu are the opposition mayors of Ankara and Istanbul, who have both proved remarkably popular in their respective cities, and would probably make stronger candidates than Kılıçdaroğlu. The second largest party in the alliance, the right-wing nationalist Good Party, even threatened to leave when it became clear that Kılıçdaroğlu would be nominated, although that seems to have been temporarily resolved. You get the idea. Kılıçdaroğlu is a relatively unpopular candidate who hasn't fared well against Erdogan in the past, and Erdogan will feel confident about beating him again. On to the second reason, the so-called Kurdish question. Generally, the Kurdish question refers to the fact that the Kurdish people do not have a homeland, but in the context of Turkey, it refers to the tension between Turkey's Kurdish population, especially its more nationalist elements, and the Turkish state, and the question of how to resolve them. The Turkish state has been fighting against Kurdish nationalist movements, most notably the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, since the PKK carried out a series of terrorist attacks on Turkish soil in the mid-80s. In its early years, when Erdogan still wanted to join the EU, his AKP party actually made a real effort to improve relations with Turkey's Kurdish minority, and begun unprecedented peace negotiations with the PKK in 2013. But they collapsed 2 years later after Erdogan's AKP party lost its majority at the June 2015 elections, and the AKP declared Kurdish independence in southeastern Turkey. Erdogan then did a complete U-turn, taking up the threat of Kurdish terrorism and massively increasing Turkey's military presence in southeastern Turkey and Syria. This strategy apparently paid dividends, and when he won a healthy majority in the 2018 election, Erdogan himself declared that he had solved the Kurdish question. However, while it might not be quite as high up on Turkish voters' priorities as it once was, in the last year or so, Erdogan has suggested that he might revisit the Kurdish question, presumably for political gain. Erdogan's demands for accepting Sweden and Finland into NATO have mostly revolved around withdrawing their support for certain Kurdish groups, and last year Erdogan announced that he would be sending troops into the semi-autonomous Kurdish region in Syria known as Rojava. This might be an attempt to remind the electorate that Kurdish separatism is a genuine security threat and paint the opposition bloc, who have made moves to woo Turkey's largest Kurdish party, the HDP, as too soft or friendly with the Kurds. Polling suggests that broadly, Erdogan's alliance and the opposition bloc are both on about 45%, with the HDP taking up the remaining 10%, which means if the opposition can sweet-talk them into a coalition, they could guarantee themselves a majority. Kılıçdaroğlu, for example, has expressed support for the idea of teaching the Kurdish language in state-run schools, and 4 of the 6 parties in the opposition bloc have met with major Kurd politicians recently. Basically, the point here is that Erdogan has a track record of instrumentalising the Kurdish question for political gain, and it looks like he's readying up to do it again. The third reason Erdogan could still win over the electorate is the AKP's control over Turkey's political institutions. Essentially, after 20 years in power, Erdogan and the AKP have significant influence over Turkey's institutional infrastructure, including the media and the judiciary, and he'll use every tool at his disposal to help him win the next election. With the media, for example, Erdogan has got into the habit of banning or suspending opposition media outlets and shutting down social media when it suits him. The AKP have also passed a series of anti-democratic laws and packed the judiciary with AKP loyalists, and Turkey's courts have stepped up their attacks on opposition politicians accordingly. In May, for example, the head of the CHP's Istanbul branch was banned from politics for an anti-Erdogan tweet. In December, Ekrem İmamoğlu was sentenced to almost 3 years in prison and barred from politics for tweets mocking the judges who cancelled the mayoral election results in 2019. And the HDP looks like it's about to be shut down over its links to Kurdish nationalist groups. You get the idea. While Erdogan might be struggling at the moment, the AKP's control over Turkey's institutions means he can essentially ban unfriendly media coverage, or if that doesn't work, just jail all his political opponents.
A couple of years ago, I was a victim of identity theft, and I only found out when a letter from the court came through my door saying that I owed a bunch of money to a broadband company for an address I'd never even lived at. After a bunch of legal back and forth, I was forced to pay the money that I allegedly owed just to try and make the problem go away. But from then on, I was determined to make sure that I wasn't caught out again. And as such, I took a number of steps, including signing up for NordVPN. Now, you surely already know that NordVPN is the world's fastest virtual private network. But you might not know that they have a whole suite of threat protection features too. In fact, NordVPN's threat protection shields you from all kinds of dangerous things online, blocking malware, trackers, and malicious ads to help prevent you from falling victim to any of these scams or phishing attacks. Not only that, they also have a dark web monitoring service. So even if your data were to fall into the wrong hands, they'd scour the dark web to notify you when someone shares, leaks, or sells your details. Hopefully meaning that you'd find out what was going on before a court order lands on your doorstep. Now, ultimately, this isn't a fun thing to think about, but trust me, it's a whole lot less fun when it becomes a reality. Also, it's not just other people that this happens to. I hope you'll agree that I'm a reasonably smart person, and I did a computer science degree, and I still got. So, click the link in the description or go to nordvpn.com/TLDR to get a huge discount on their 2-year plan. And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose. So, thanks for your support, and make sure you click the link in the description.